Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Two Sleuth podcast. Today on the show, I actually have someone on who speaks my language, who works with practices like I work with, none other than Angel Amaya. And if you don't know Angel, let me tell you a little bit about her. She is in her ninth year working in patient financing space. She finds herself more excited than ever to help providers utilize financing to grow their business. And by the way, she's in big cases, just like I am, fixed full arch, but others as well. She currently serves as the VP of National Accounts for Proceed Finance. In this role, she works with some of the largest DSOs in the country. So I couldn't be more excited to have this conversation today. We're going to roll up the sleeves and get to it. Welcome, Angel. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is so much fun. So I work a lot of many of my clients use Proceed. I think all of them do pretty much, right? As many do. So I'm excited to talk about what it is specifically you do, what you're seeing, and not from like the sales pitch from a stage, no offense, right? That's what we all do. We promote our companies and our business, but really rolling up the sleeves and what you're seeing underneath, right? Peel back the layers and really have an honest conversation, because I know what we're seeing when we work with treatment coordinators and doctors and practices from single location to multi location, even some of the DSO groups that we work with from our side. And so I want to hear from your side. So let's rip off the band-aid. Let's get into the conversation. But even before then, how did you get involved in the dental space, in the finance space? What's your origin story of coming to this wonderful industry we love?
Sure. So, my background actually is in weight loss surgery. Um, Forever ago, I ran a surgeon's practice, and then we built a couple surgery centers, five of them across the country. Obviously, there was a huge need for patient financing in that space, about 50% patient financing. So, we were users of patient financing. And that just evolved. I ended up working for a company. We started a patient solutions uh, division for them. They'd been in home improvement. We started a patient solution division and it just evolved. And then I joined Proceed 2 years ago. I've been here. It was just 2 years ago, just recently. So I've been here 2 years now.
Congratulations on that. Proceed Finance is definitely one of the leaders in the space in dental for big cases and being able to provide funding, which is so critically important to use as a tool, right? It's not the end all be all, but as a significant tool to be able to work with patients to help them to get them to a yes. So, what are you seeing as a profile, if you will, right? Generic, we can be generic or we can be very specific of a profile. Because I know for us, we help our clients to be able to find that ideal treatment coordinator, patient education, finance, whatever you want to call them, whether it's a patient or a treatment coordinator led consult or a doctor led consult. We don't really tell them which is better or worse necessarily, because it depends on the team they have existing. We start working with them. So, what are you seeing as really a good profile for that position in the marketplace?
I always we're out talking to providers all the time, and I always tell providers, I hate to say it, but no one wants to hear the word sales. Like nobody in healthcare dental wants to hear the word sales.
Yeah, but get over it because you're in sales,
But
right?
right,
I mean,
that's the reality, right? Whether we
yeah.
like it or not, that's what you're doing. And so I say, we see how these docs spend all of this money and all this time going out training to do these large cases. And then at the end of the day, they have this employee who's ultimately responsible for getting these cases closed. So I always say, find someone that has that sales background, that just has that mentality. We can teach them the clinical side of it. It's hard to teach the sales side of it. I feel like, they have to kind of have that in them. They kind of have to have that, that energy, if you will. They kind of have to have that skill to really be able to talk to patients, especially when it's coming to financing. You do end up having conversations about a patient's personal financial information just inevitably comes up. So if you have someone at that role who's just not comfortable with those conversations, I don't care how much you've spent on training, it's just not going to happen. You won't see the success in the practice.
Well, absolutely. And, you bring up a great point. So clinicians work so much and to educate themselves on the clinical aspect, right? And whether it's the clinicians or the groups or the practices, the DSOs spend all this time honing their marketing message, right? So their digital imprint, their branding, and how to get the leads to at least come to them, right? To get opportunities. One of the pieces, though, you've got to have the right quarterback, right? The right quarterback, the treatment coordinator who has this 360 holistic view of, yeah, they should be interested in how they're handling the lead calls. Whether you're in a massive DSO where you have a call center understanding what are they saying? How are they getting those pieces of information? What's that handoff look like? Or what are they saying at the front when they're greeting the patient for the first time? What are those pieces of information? How are the digital records being taken? Even if it's the treatment coordinator doing it, what's the doctor's impact? Having that 360 view for the patient flow, the patient experience, that's what we find is critically important. That piece, that aspect of the do you have that teaching like the product, right? We always say that it's not the what, the product, it's the why, the motivation, and those pieces. Are you seeing that in who you're working with and what you're sharing with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. What's funny too is I think you have so many new players in the space that are getting really good at this, right? I mean, there's a few that kind of come to mind that are just really good at this. And so it's interesting to sit back and watch, like, what are they doing differently? Like, what are, if I look at those practices or those DSOs that are just out there killing it, what is the difference? What are the differences? And I mean, ultimately, I think this is one of the biggest pieces. Who they hire in this position is so critical. And to your point, that entire patient experience. And I do always say, hey, like literally go in your practice and sit through that entire experience like you're the patient. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you feeling? Like go through all of the senses, and that matters. That patient experience matters. I was recently at a conference and hugely successful group, but they had called up a bunch of former patients, great before and after stories, and really let them tell their story and let their staff ask questions of these patients. And one of the questions that came out of the audience was, hey, be really critical now that you've gone through this whole process and you have this beautiful after story. Be really critical of the process. What was there anything we could have done better? It was so interesting to me is this gentleman who, been speaking for some time, an incredible before and after story, and really likable guy up there on stage. And he says, oh, yeah, I have one. And his answer was that when he had initially come in for his consultation, there were no pictures on the wall. And it just struck me that of all the things he could have talked about, because I think I did expect he'd go somewhere like, oh, maybe that first phone call, maybe she wasn't super pleasant, or maybe it felt rushed, or, all the things that I do typically see. And instead, he was like, there were no pictures on the wall. And it made me feel like, is this place legitimate? Are they just, did they just pop in here? This is a pop up shop. They have nothing on the walls. And it really did make me be constantly thinking and be aware of like that entire patient experience and how much every single detail matters.
Yeah, so much so because that's number two in the five steps of, are you going to be a player in the market, which is do you look like a full arch clinic? And it doesn't mean that every right if you're doing GP work, right? If you're doing a traditional dental clinic, right? Because I call them all clinics. They're all medical clinics of the mouth, right? We know the oral systemic, it, I always say even if you're doing all the rest of it, doesn't mean that everywhere you go, there has to be before and afters of full arch surgeries that you've done, right? Because you can still have a family practice with, hygiene for the general practitioner, but at least have one room, have one area, have one book
Designated
out,
area,
so
yes.
exactly there needs to be something. And like I said, that's number two in the five steps of if you're adding, because the patient experience is one of the big pieces that I've been speaking on a lot lately, whether it's in front of a large group of doctors or on podcast webinars. So I'm so grateful that you brought that out because I think it's critically important. And that transparency of, okay, now that it's all done and over with, go for the honest feedback. What really did was your experience like? Is there anything we could have done better? Because so much goes unsaid, right? For that one comment you get on Google reviews that's poor, there's 10 more out there that people just won't say anything. And that's why, so companies like Different Kind, that I love the work that they do, because they get that instant feedback and it's a quick little 5 little questions that gets to the text. So, because for somebody to leave a Google review, right, or Yelp or whatever platform, it's a lot, right? Because it means a lot when you do. But if there's an interim piece of like, I can just say a little something and give them direct feedback without it, it being anonymous. So it's not like, next time I walk in, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, right? That craziness. So I'm glad you brought that forward. I think it's so critically important. Another thing I want to touch on, because there's a lot of chatter about this and we work with clients on it, and there is a lot of variance, right, in the variable, right? I come from the manufacturing side, and I think it's critical to have people invested the same way that owners are invested in the profitability, right, for their practice as they grow. Let's talk a little bit about compensation model for these that are bringing in the vast majority of the revenue into the practice, the production and the collection side. What are you seeing out there that you're recommending, and some of the different models that you're seeing that are most effective for those treatment coordinators?
Yeah, I think you've hit on if I were speaking to a group of docs, this would be, and I felt like there was one thing I needed to leave them with, like they took nothing else from my time with them, I think this would be it. And and I always say, if you are leaving your fate or the fate of the practice to, a 15 or $17 an hour employee, right? Who at the end of the day on Friday, when she goes home or he goes home, if their paycheck doesn't change based on the cases that they were able to close, if they take home the same amount of money on Friday either way, you're frankly almost incentivizing them to not close the cases, right? Because there's less work if the patient just leaves. There's a whole lot less work. They're overworked. I mean, most of these, we've seen it. Most of these, their phone doesn't stop ringing. They're so busy. And frankly, if the patient leaves and doesn't move forward, it's less work. And they take home the same paycheck Friday either way. So I think if you're not incentivizing them to help close cases, you're almost incentivizing them not to close the cases. I mean, that's just the truth.
Or the other piece, close the case, they go forward, they do their, they come in for their smile design or whatever you call it, and then it's not yet surgery day because, maybe you don't have, a CRNA or anesthesiologist on staff, right? Because you're just, you're doing, say, a handful of cases a month or whatever it is, and it might be 2 or 3 weeks out for surgery. Then they get their first bill, or maybe their second bill before
Right?
surgery
Or
happens,
second bill,
and
yeah.
then they right, and they're like, they get cold feet. I'm going to my nephew's wedding here this week, so I'm thinking of cold feet and wedding. It's on my mind. And they get cold feet, and right, and then they've got to save the case. So are you incentivizing them where it's collections, right? Incentivizing them on collections, not production. Because if you can incentivize them to bring in cash, sorry, Proceed Finance, I know you work for them, but there's cost involved there too. But helping them to say, hey, okay, so maybe we take, half of it through some loans or some financing, and the other half, how much do you have saved up toward this procedure? You've been wanting to get this for a long time. So those types of pieces, I love that. And then it also comes to, saving cases. And then, of course, the big bugaboo, which I know who you were referencing. Maybe I think we've had a few conversations before about, the big elephant in the room, which is the no-show rate, right? And there's ways to restrict the funnel, put governors on that golf cart of helping the no-show rate to improve for those that actually book consultations. I'd love to just open up the conversation and get your take on it, on ways to improve the show rate, right, or decrease the no-show rate for those consultations. So please, what are some of your thoughts?
I think, we of course we always talk about what's the right cadence for reminders. That's huge, and how you're doing it. I'm a text person, so I like text reminders. Most people are doing that these days. I feel like that conversation of what's the cadence and how are you doing it's almost, we've heard it all a billion times. So I think the one thing that I would tell you that I think maybe we're not talking about all the time that I think is really critical is, I always say, make it really personal. However, you're sending out that reminder, whether that's a text, an email, I don't care if you're using a system to do it. Let's change up that messaging a little bit. So instead of saying, like, hey, ABC Dental is going to see you on Thursday at 2 p.m., text back Y or no, or we know Y or N. We all have those. We get them all the time. Instead, if we can change that up to say, hey, this is Stephanie at ABC Dental. I'm really looking forward to see you on Thursday at 2 o'clock. I'm going to meet you at the front desk. If this doesn't work for you, let me know. That's a very different reminder. And I always say it's almost like going to the gym. If I have thoughts of going to the gym tomorrow, pretty easy for me to just no-show the gym. However, if Stephanie is waiting for me at the gym, it's a whole lot harder to just no-show on her, right? And so I think it's, if we can really personalize those reminders just as much as possible, and truly then do have Stephanie waiting at the front desk for them, right? Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm so glad you made it. But I think the my biggest feedback that you're not already hearing all the time, we can certainly talk about cadence and how those reminders go out, but I think the biggest differentiator that we're not talking about is like really personalizing that for them.
Well, I think you touch on something there, right? We like to call it humanize it, right? Rather than it being the practice, at least put the doctor's name, right? Instead of XYZ Dental, it's Dr. So and so. office, right? That's another way, but even more so, like you said, it's, hey, it's Angel, and I'm looking forward to seeing you, and I'll meet you up front. And then when they do come up front, have, Yesenia, Jenny, whoever it is up front, ping and say, hey, so and so's here. Watch the practice management system. They're here. Great. You go up and you greet them, right? Make that connection from when the phone call to the, yeah, and the handoff, hand up is what we call it at GNA Consult when we work with clients on how do you best create that stickiness, that fidelity with patients, right? Because they're prospects, actually, they're not even patients yet, to get them in the door once you actually have made that emotional connection with them. And the other piece, too, that we like to talk about is asking them when you have them on the phone, right? The lead comes in, and whoever handles your lead calls, the call center, whoever it is to ask them toward the end, and how is it best to communicate with you? Because some people hate text messages. And I can tell you, we even have clients that, we've slowly like moved over and said, no, no, you need to start looking at your emails. We have one who it's a running joke now that he's like, yes, and I even check my emails 3 times a day now, thanks to you. And it's just, but asking them, right? Asking the question rather than making the assumption of, great, I'm going to text over your, is this a good number to text over your new patient paperwork? It's just critically important to ask those questions, because asking, and it's almost as if asking permission. May I send that over? And I know my friend Joanne Majors at the Soft Skills Institute talks about that. Asking permission first, and then being able to humanize it, as you say, personalize it, makes such a big difference. And a lot of this is so difficult to put into metrics, right? Because measuring everything of here's the cadence, here's the follow up, here's the best way to do it. It's easy to be able to follow numbers, but that little piece of, did that really make the difference? Yes or no? And I think that's where some of the challenge. Are you finding that with clients that you're working with in the DSO space?
We are, it's funny. The larger the DSO, it's almost like I always say, it's like turning the Titanic, right? It's harder to instill some of these things the larger the DSO gets. And some of them, do are more focused on this, I think, right now than others. Um, but it's a constant topic. I will say it's a hot topic, as you know, it's a hot topic right now everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I want to talk about, because you've been in it for a number of years, a couple of years now with Proceed, but as far as like financing in general and how to be able to finance anything, whether it's I don't know if you said home improvement, that's what I heard, and sometimes I hear things that aren't actually said. That's okay. The regular listeners know that, and they'll blow me up on socials. It's all right. It'll be more fun for everybody. But one of the things that I know, especially in full arch, right, when in full mouth rehab, when people are trying to get this life changing experience for themselves, you build them up, they hear what's possible, and then they go for financing and they get declined. I can tell you, even for myself, good credit score and all that, like something happened and I got declined for a credit card that I was applying for some financing about a year ago, and then realized, oh, wait, like I personally put freezes on all three of my credit reports. Like, duh, way to go, Greg. That was dumb.
That
But I
initial
mean, just
decline
even
like
my
hurt your
reaction
heart.
was like, oh, how dare you? Like, what? No, right? And so I can only imagine with patients that, are eager to have this done, have a belief of where they are credit wise, and then get that initial prequal, right? That soft credit pull through finance, or, through Proceed or other, then get denied. So walk me through what that looks like. What is that like? And then what are next steps for some patients? So practices that are listening can, because that's something that we talk about and we work with practices on, like of what they can do. So it's not like an all or nothing of, okay, everybody cross their fingers, let's hope that it comes back, oh, or yay. I mean, it shouldn't be that way, right? Shouldn't be like you're at a sporting event and you're trying to kick a game-winning field goal. So can you tell
It
it's
does feel
football
like that
season? Like I'm
sometimes,
locked in
right?
here, right? Yeah, the quarterback and the kicking game-winning field
You have a
goal.
whole game
So
going.
sorry, please go ahead.
I love it. No, it's I talk about this a lot because I feel like if you have a staff that's nervous about a decline, they're just less likely to do an application. So I feel like one of the things when I'm going in to talk with staff and really train staff on, like, best practices to close cases, this is an area I always cover because I think if I can get them comfortable knowing like declines are going to happen, I mean, that's just the reality. And to your point, maybe they do have good credit. Like maybe it's maybe they have a freeze, right? There's all kinds of reasons. Declines just absolutely happen. I would say in the average practice, you could expect that about 50% of the time you're going to get a decline, right? So you better know how to deal with it. So I always say a couple of things. First of all, make your lender be the bad guy, right? Like, I don't know what's going on with ABC lending today. They've had a couple weird declines today, but it's okay. We've got other options. So, you know, make it no big deal. Like it's totally no big deal. We're just going to keep going. B, remember that they're still your patient. They're no longer mine. If they've applied for Proceed and we've declined them, they're not mine. They're not my customer, but they are still yours. So let's figure out how to save them as a patient, whether that's now or down the road. So we'll look at options to do it now, certainly. So, best case scenario, you have additional lenders. Maybe you have a second look or subprime lender that you can hit. I would do that. And then you start looking at what are other options. I will give an example with Proceed. We can have them use someone to borrow on their behalf. So you can say, hey, do you have someone in your life, a loved one, a friend, who would be willing to borrow on your behalf, right? And if the answer is yes, great, we have that person do an application. If the answer is no, I just absolutely have no one, then we're going to start looking at, okay, are there other funds? Do we have means to other funds that we can utilize for this case? And so that does get into a slightly personal conversation. Better get comfortable with that. Talking about what other possible forms of payment can we find. Worst case scenario, I always say we look at the treatment plan. Can we modify the treatment plan to either make it affordable or make it financeable? And the patient leaves here, better. Maybe not ideal. It's not maybe optimal care. It isn't the full arch we were hoping for or whatever it may be, but they've left here better, right? And we've maintained them as a patient and we can say, okay, like, let's do this now. Let's make a plan together. We're going to do this now. The things you've got to work on in your credit to be, financeable. Let's work on that. And then in a year or whatever that is, 6 months, let's come back together. And so really it's like, help the patient leave there better than they were, save them as a patient, whether that's now or in the future. But my biggest thing is just make it like it's no big deal, right? Nobody wants to be like, oh my gosh, you were declined. Like, oh, so just like, I don't know what's going on. So weird, right? Like, that's what I always say. Just make it like no big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love those tips. And what we're talking about at G&A Consult with our clients is all that work really goes into it in the very beginning, right? And that in the greet and build rapport. And greet and build rapport does not mean that you talk about the weather and the traffic and their purse, right? There is intentional conversation that happens in the beginning, and having those very intimate conversations about finances and where are you at and what is it that different parts of your current situation contribute to this particular situation, right? To get you into a better clinical, medical, oral health condition.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
And that's what you're referencing. And I think it's so critically important that that's really the direction that we're going. It's not, what can I sell you today? It's, how can we get you out of the disease state that you arrived in, get you into a better oral health condition? And then how does the group meet the patients where they're at with what they're able to do today in order to get them into a better position for tomorrow and beyond? Because again, so often in fix full large teeth in a day, whatever you want to call it, there is this mindset of it's all or nothing. And kind of it is, but also there are stair steps to get them to where they need to get to with what their current condition is and where they're able to get to today and in the short term to be able to have a long-term patient so that there is an opportunity to be able to walk them through a process. And I think that's really where a gap happens in the knowledge, the understanding, the learning, the training, all around with the clinician, with the treatment coordinators, with the team, with those taking the calls, with the form fills, the surveys, with the marketing. That's why a holistic approach is so critically important. And the information that we share at G&A Consult is really all about that. And they can implement themselves, or they can certainly accelerate that by bringing on a team. So I just appreciate you bringing that forward. Okay, Angel, this is the point of the program. All of my guests play a little something called What the Sleuth is Going On? 3 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
First thing that comes to mind.
Oh boy.
Are you ready to play?
I think so. Okay, I'm ready. I'm nervous.
Okay, good. Nerves are good.
I'm going to be like, cheese. I don't know. Okay.
Question number 1.
Okay.
What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
Oh, boy. Like a person? Like tell you who the person is? It was my nephew. He's young, maybe not great oral hygiene. Yeah, that's who comes to mind. Yeah.
Fair enough, and I'm glad you didn't name him. You can tag him when this
Yeah,
comes out. This episode comes out, but we're no,
he'll know it's him. His
leave
wife
the.
will know it's him. Yeah.
Ah,
His wife is like
that's even.
supplying him with gum full time. So yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay, well, at least there's some awareness around it, so
Right.
that's a good thing. Okay,
Definitely makes
question number 2: if you could change one thing about your smile, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Um, maybe whiter teeth. And that's such an easy solution too. I mean, it's not rocket science, but maybe a wider smile. Huh.
I was just thinking about that for myself the other day because I'll do home whitening, from time to time, and I was just thinking about that the other day. And I'm like, that's not really like the color that I want it to be, and I'm like, but then it's like, you got to do it for
But you
so
gotta do
many
some work,
days,
right?
and then I got to and then I got to stay away from coffee or drink it through a straw, which I kind of do anyway. So I'm one of those. It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 3: if you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product, and no, you can't choose your own if you've got one in the hopper, which one would you choose and why?
Invisalign. So does that count?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that counts for sure. Yeah, that's actually, I'm going to say this to my producer. What we really need to go back, because I think you're going to be episode like somewhere in the 80s. Like we've done about 80 some odd episodes now. And we really need to go back and like have a ticker of like all the different answers. And I want to say like clear aligners is up there, like for the most frequent. It's definitely double digits in the answers. Because I did clear aligner therapy with Invisalign. Maybe we can get Invisalign to sponsor the show this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Because I did, and I wear my retainers faithfully, and they're still kind of moving a little bit because it was a while ago. So I think I'm gonna have to do it again because I'm like, well, because here, a little bit of vulnerability because that's what people love listening to this podcast. So when my front teeth came in, my front teeth didn't come in. My adult teeth, my front tooth came in, and then the other one came in like 6 months later. So yeah, like the song for Christmas, all I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth. My brother incessantly, Dale Essenmacher, incessantly teased me because my one front tooth came in and not both of them. And I'll actually see him, because I'm going to my nephew's wedding. His oldest son is getting married this Friday, and I'm going to the wedding this week. And so, yes, I'm going to have to remind him of that. Thank you for bringing up such a soft spot. Yes, I'm in a shame spiral now. Thank you, Angel. I'm just kidding. Well, thank you for playing What the Sleuth is Going On. Angel, I want to respect your time, my listening audience's time. Some people are running on a treadmill or outside, and I don't want them passing out because of the time. They know that it's about a 30-minute episode. What have you not shared with my listening audience, or what have I not asked you that you are just dying to share with them?
The one thing that I would share, because we kind of talked briefly about cash. So the one thing I will tell you, I tell providers, have everyone fill out a patient financing application, right? They don't know the difference. They don't know what your process is. If they just assume that's part of the process, they will. And what's interesting is if you have a patient who walks in and says, hey, I don't need to fill out a patient application because I'm going to take out a home equity mortgage. So I'm good. I don't need it. And you know what happens? They leave there today. They have to go home. They have to apply for the home equity line of credit. They have to have the home, they have to come inspect the home. They have to have it appraised. And now this time has passed since their consult. The excitement's waned a little bit, right? And unfortunately, life happens. That's just what happens. And the probability or likelihood of them coming back to move forward, just each passing day starts to decline. And so my suggestion is always have them fill it out. It's just another option for them. And my suggestion is have them move forward today with financing. Say, hey, we can move forward today and pay that off. There's no prepayment penalty. Pay it off in 30 days when the home equity line of credit gets through. And your case conversion rate, your close rate will dramatically increase if you start kind of thinking of it that way. And it really is just trying to get them we've talked about getting that personal story from them. Why are they here today? what's what made them finally pull the trigger? And something did, right? They've been thinking about this a long time. Something made them pull the trigger, and really coming back to that, like, hey, I know you are doing this because of X, right? And let's go ahead and move forward today. This gets us moving forward and gets us started today. Go take out whatever that mortgage is, or whatever your plan was. Absolutely go do that, and you can pay this off and gives you complete flexibility. So that would be my one suggestion, because I know cash is king, 100%, but I think it is just about giving people options and letting them move forward today.
Yeah, that is absolutely wise words because it is known and it is true, right? It is an emotional decision of why today compared to 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago, depending on what type of patient that, the avatar that you're actually speaking with and moving forward, right? While they are emotionally engaged for sure and making sure they have the tools necessary if the financially interested party in their household isn't with them at that time. So I love that as a closing thought and idea. And my guest today on the Two Sleuth podcast has been Angel Amaya. She is the VP of National Accounts for Proceed Finance. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your pearls of wisdom that you have today.